Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Facing the Facts. I am your host, Pamela Bonkiyung, and I'm just wondering how you all are doing, and I hope that you've been able to cope with this lockdown, and with some loosening on the restrictions. I suppose we will regain some sense of normalcy of a different kind, of course. But as always, this program aims to have open and objective discussions to empower ourselves with information which should help us make informed decisions or choices. And the intended result is to get us to think holistically in seeking solutions to society's problems. Are you with me? So today we're going to be discussing technology meets financial services. And I don't know what you know about the financial services available in Cameroon. Have you ever tried getting a loan from traditional financial institutions to start a business? What was your experience as a small or medium-sized enterprise? What do you think your chances of securing funding are without collateral? So today we are very lucky to have someone on the show who has leveraged technology to streamline the process of securing finances using mobile technologies. He's specialized in the area of what is called fintech or financial technology. Who is she, you might wonder? So she is the co-founder and president of Ovamba Solutions, Inc. It is an award-winning African TradeTech company that creates culturally attuned technologies for financial institutions so that they can serve formal and informal African small and medium-sized enterprises in the trade and commodities in the area, specializing in the trade and commodity sectors with short-term capital and financial inclusion. Ovamba Solutions combine innovative Sharia-compliant structures with e-commerce, logistics services, and technology to drive financial inclusion and promote growth. Our guest of today oversees technology development, strategic implementation, investor communications, and global business development for Ovamba. Her past career includes building a $500 million life insurance investment fund for a Washington, D.C.-based insurance investment firm, where she led investor communications and asset management divisions. She has held positions with companies such as Unisys Corporation, IBM, KPMG Consulting, BearingPoint and Rothschild. She was listed in the Digital Undivided Report as one of only 34 Black women in the USA to have raised more than $1 million for a technology company, which was featured in Vanity Fair magazine. She is listed on Innovative Finance's 2016, 2017, and 2018 Women in Fintech Power List, and on Letty's 80s Top 100 Women in Fintech 2019. So she previously served on the board of Cameroon-based and one of Africa's leading tech hubs and incubator, Active Spaces. You probably have heard of it. So I am happy to welcome Viola Llewellyn, and Viola will tell me if I pronounce her name correctly. Welcome, Viola.
Good to see you. Happy Sunday, Pamela. No, you've got it just right. Viola Llewellyn.
Oh, thank you. I've been trying to practice pronouncing it properly. So thank you, Viola, for being with us. We're so happy to have you. And before we proceed, we just want to remind you, our audience, to send in your questions and comments throughout the interview for Viola. So Viola, coming back to you, we would like to begin by knowing you a bit better. So you were born and bred in the UK, but your parents are from Cameroon and your origin straddles Fontem and Bangma. Is that correct?
Yes, and my mother is Bafo from Kumba.
Okay. Oh, wow. That's interesting to note. So you see, she's our dear Cameroonian sister. So you attended Thika Baptist College sometime, didn't you?
Yes, I was allowed onto the campus until I was asked not to be on it anymore.
So how was your experience of education here compared to like that which you had in the UK?
Horrific. Didn't like it. It was the 70s, late 70s. I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
I had exposure to our culture based on food and what my parents said at home, and contacts such as pen pals with my cousins. But that didn't prepare me for the horrors of boarding school, which were extreme and very difficult. And the style of teaching was based on reproduce and regurgitate this information. Your understanding of this is not required. You do this so that you can pass exams. And if you question the teacher, you're in deep trouble. And on top of that, the way that teachers taught and set up exams, it was as if they were saying, if nobody passes this test, then I'm a great teacher, because it was just so difficult. And it's a very back to front way of teaching, and it's had generational impact that you're seeing today.
Oh, wow. So when you compare it to the UK, you clearly obviously preferred the UK version of education.
Only because that's what I was used to. What I actually preferred was the way my father opened my mind up to learning. I could read when I was 3. What most people don't realize is children understand language a lot faster than you realize, but the weak mechanics of how your brain is wired and how your mouth works, or how you are able to, let's say, hold a pen in order to write, is a technology that the body has to get used to. So I was very used to a very submersive way of learning using all of my senses. And that meant if I didn't understand something, I would question it and ask for an example or an application as to why do you need this? How does it work? Where are their examples, and how does it connect to the next piece of information, which is actually the scientific process. And children before the age of 5 are the ultimate scientists, because they're always testing how things work and fit together. That is a feature that was very missing from my boarding school education. And so when I was grandly dismissed, I went off to a day school where, surprisingly, GHS, a government school, I did fine. I passed, average. But that element of regurgitation was still there, but it didn't have the politics that I experienced in boarding school.
Okay. That's interesting to know that difference between a government school and a boarding school. Most people tend to think it's the latter compared to what your experience has been. So coming back to your professional background in communications and asset management, which is very diverse because you work for KPMG, Rothschild, Unisys Corporation, IBM, etc. So how did your role prepare you for Ovamba?
I love the fact that when you look in the rearview mirror, everything starts to make sense, because we're the sum total of all of the little micro decisions and choices and opportunities that we went through in order to get where we were. Those parts of my career came on the heels of having worked for companies like IBM, Digital Equipment Corporation, and Wang Computers, companies whose brands are barely remembered today as technology has moved forward and they didn't catch up. And when I came to the United States on vacation in 1992 and never left, it was quite easy to leverage the skills that I had learned in terms of selling, marketing, communications, and understanding how technology is applied in a commercial setting, and explaining to individuals who may not be technology or technically acquainted why they need this, or helping them to understand what their needs and what the needs assessment and what those gaps are and how this technology will fit. Otherwise, why on earth would we be doing this? So getting into these companies and working both operationally and in marketing and in communications, and learning finance from individuals, because I'm not educated in that particular discipline, was helpful.
Oh, well, that's interesting to note. Let's try to break down what fintech is in essence, and this can prepare us mentally to understand what Ovamba Inc. does. So, according to Investopedia, fintech or financial technology is used to describe new tech that seeks to improve and automate the delivery and use of financial services. And at its core, fintech is utilized to help companies, business owners, and consumers better manage their financial operations, processes, and lives by utilizing specialized software and algorithms that are used on computers, and increasingly we're seeing smartphones. So this innovative technology that's now competing with traditional methods of delivering financial services. So Viola, is that about right in your dictionary? Would you like to add definition?
Yes, it's very much a textbook definition, but I think one of the great things about your show, Pamela, is that you try to bring topics that may be very broad or difficult to understand and bring it into some sort of relatability. So let's go back to the beginning. The abacus, that was a form of financial technology. It allowed you to calculate and tabulate. so that you could have access to quantity, so that you could understand quantity. Let's move forward really quickly to the ATM machines. We've had fintech around for a very long time. The technologies that have been innovated and integrated into everyday life is the way I translate and I explain its use. Anything that streamlines financial access, integration, and transferability, and any kind of visibility, transparency is financial technology. But the continent, Africa itself, has exploded with solutions because most technology is fueled by a desire to achieve something or to improve or disrupt something that happened before.
Exactly. So coming back to Ovamba, what inspired you to start Ovamba with your co-founder, Marvin Cole?
It was really to take advantage of the inefficiencies and the market need that existed for businesses to gain access to capital, which is where many fintech innovators begin, looking at a system or a process that is inefficient and trying to improve that and bring transparency or speed or a better spread of economic gain when it is enacted and adopted by people. Marvin and I wanted to, quote unquote, do stuff in Africa, which is such a vague, annoying and ridiculous phrase used by people who don't actually know what they want to do. They just have a vague idea that we're in the neighborhood of the opportunity to do something. We wanted to find a way to deliver access to capital because we kept hearing that this was an issue. The wonderful thing about what Marvin and myself and the rest of the Ovamba team have experienced is that most of our assumptions were wrong, and that if we had not gone through the painful journey of trying to start a business in Cameroon, which is one of the hardest places ever to initiate a startup, we wouldn't have the opportunity or the advantage of coming to concrete experiences, solutions, and conclusions that are absolutely spot on.
I mean, that's interesting because I was going to ask you, where you launched first, but I'm going to come to that. So let's look at Ovamba. I know I sort of read about it at the intro, but it'd be nice to hear from you in layman's terms, like what Ovamba is all about. Because, I mean, what is it that you do? Because you've highlighted that you found, some gaps in the market, and so it's kind of plugging in solutions where there aren't any. So what is it that Ovamba does? Bringing together financial service providers to be able to have access to, or to make it available to those who had no accessibility before? What is different about Ovamba?
What's different about Ovamba is firstly how we came to the business solutions that we have innovated. When we started out and you asked us about our journey, we thought that it was about bringing more capital into the system. There's lots of money in Cameroon. It's just not accounted for in a way that people can quantify the size of the market or identify the direction and location that that money should move and at what velocity. The next thing that is a problem that helped us to become what we are today is the way in which risk is assessed or how credit is awarded does not take into account the dynamics of business owners, especially in the informal sector. So when you go into your microfinance institution, they'll tell you things are 2% per month. That's because his other microfinance friend down the street is also offering 2% per month. But because there isn't very much transparency, those fees actually rack up. There are also limits on the Treasury, which are assessed by how well the businesses are performing or their non-performing loan portfolios are performing. So you have a situation where a business who is in the trade sector, which is majority of Cameroon's small and medium enterprises, are trying to find ways to get the right amount of money at the right time to solve cash flow issues and buy the goods that they need to sell so that they can be profitable. Our solution is different because we looked at how the inefficiencies in risk management were occurring. The processes in microfinance and bank institutions take too long to make decisions. And we looked at the fact that businesses operate in a way that isn't very clear. They are often multi-banked, difficult to understand, and may not always have the collateral that a bank requires. And the final piece of that is they're not really concerned with helping a business to succeed or to have any form of generational or transferable wealth. So Ovamba is different because we want businesses to be wealthy and sustainable, and to be able to pass that wealth on to generations, so that we don't keep having this eclipse of business success when the pa has died and all that money disappears because it's been frittered away ad hoc into collateralized loans. Being able to fund the movement of trade is the best way to help solve the problems of majority of the businesses that we want to focus on. So our system is different from banks because we're measuring for risk, we're buying the goods that customers need, and we're providing physical and business products and services and tools to help them to be better. And today what we are is a solution for banks and the central banks to be able to do this using the benefit of everything we have come to a successful conclusion on from the long, deep beta testing that we did.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting to note. And just out of curiosity, so do you also double as a venture capitalist in some way?
Not
Or do you just...
That is such a separate and different product. Venture capitalism is a highly risky area that is well handled, especially by companies that are in also combining hub and incubator with capital to get started. Ovamba is focused on businesses who are in the trade and importation and manufacturing sector who need to import goods and inventory or raw materials in order to make transformation or to sell. And they want to get their hands on these products either from an international or a domestic source. Most companies who come to us have had maybe 1 or 2 years of revenue generating history. And now that we partner with banks to do this, our customers are now the banks who have customers that they have failed to serve either with traditional loans or any other product that would meet their business requirements in order to grow.
So how do you help these businesses succeed?
Many businesses that come to our bank partners and to ourselves when we were self-originating have a very clear idea in their minds as to what their businesses are doing. And some of their businesses change from season to season, depending on what their expertise is in either a product or a service. We help these businesses by not forcing them to have to be traditional, so we can help them make sense of what their finances and their accounting standpoint is with the technologies that we have, with mobile apps and the features in our mobile apps known as Ovamba Plus. And we analyze what their business is most successful at, and we look for the best source of those products that they want to sell. So we've got customers, for example, who started out selling paint or other home decorating items in the Douala area, who had ambitions that they really couldn't realize because they had challenges with getting the right amount of money to do larger inventory purchases. Because when they go to some of these suppliers, they're just a little African company. They don't see the growth trajectory. They don't see the promise in that business. So they can never take advantage of bulk discounts. Ovamba's system is in the situation now where by working with banks, we can aggregate demand and begin to bring down the price of different assets. These same customers who are ordering maybe 2 containers every 6 months find themselves in a very vicious cycle of having to go to a bank, wait for approval of a loan. It might not be the right amount. They now have to find a way to go and buy those goods from some region where they don't have the constant loyalty of constantly ordering, and then wait 90 days for those goods to come across the ocean while their shops are empty. And while their shops are empty, they're losing their customers, they're losing traction. And their money in the bank that they're paying on the loan is not actually earning any revenue. As soon as those goods come in, they now have to find a way to sell this and make their market very, very quickly because they've got to pay off the loan and go and start the cycle all over again. Ovamba does what all good technology does, disrupts the cycle that is not functional by analyzing the business, analyzing the goods, the inventory, and where they are, taking all of this, including the supplier risk side of it, using our technology to authorize and to process their funding and buy and bring those goods in and provide those customers with the logistics that they may need, almost like an Amazon fulfillment. They need to be able to get the goods in, they need to store it, they need to sell it quickly, they need to report that information, and they need to do it according to the cash flow and movements and dynamics of their particular business and asset class. Banks don't do that. Ovamba does.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's very interesting, because it feels almost like a kind of, previously we used to have those coffee unions where people would come together and people would sell in bulk. So I suppose we were helping them do that. But I was just wondering, because if somebody is ordering more goods via Ovamba now, what can they present as collateral if they didn't have it previously to put into a bank?
I love that question, Pamela, and it's so important for your guests and your friends and the audience out there to understand. The province of collateral belongs to the activities that relate to credit. Credit is the extension of capital with the hopes that it will be paid back, sometimes without any kind of anchoring item. So when you say collateral, what we're really talking about is a banking activity that is about mortgaging somebody's land or home. That's really the activity of some of these banks that we want to help. We don't do credit. You heard me say that we measure risk and buy the goods that the customers need. And we're trying to help banks to do this that way. That way they can open up the spigot of customers that they can serve to a much broader, wider selection of customers. Ovamba does not do lending, does not do loans. That is the activity of banking. We are not a bank. We are a technology company with additional services geared towards creating a healthy business ecosystem in order to generate wealth and sustainable activity. So customers can come to us. They don't need collateral. What they do need to have is a business, and they need to be able to show that their money goes through a bank account, and they need to be able to show that they can successfully sell their inventory. And we will help them to the next stage of growth from there.
Wow, that's very interesting. Coming to the makeup of Ovamba, I found this very interesting. Ovamba is quite specific about being Sharia compliant. Why was that important to your business model?
It was because it was sheer kismet. It was serendipity. It was a wonderful mistake. We were experimenting and doing these beta tests of understanding the ecosystem for banking. And came to ask ourselves the questions: why is the repayment of loans so low? Why is the performance here so very poor? How can we find a way to not make people come to us with the requirement for land or collateral when we don't want to be a bank? Because we understand that banking is not the solution to financial inclusion. So when we started looking at who are the customers that need this capital and what are they doing with it, it was clear to us it was those customers that were trying to generate profits from selling goods. And everywhere you look, Mboki market, and even as far away as Chad, Congo, northern Nigeria, they're all coming into places where there are ports, where they're buying goods so that they can go and sell them. So we thought, why don't we see if we can disrupt the process of lending by instead helping them get the right goods to sell? Because some of them fail when they don't have the ability to vet suppliers, or when they don't have the ability to get a large enough amount of capital in order to get more goods. I made reference to customers who were buying 2 containers of goods every 6 months. We now have customers who are buying 32 containers every 2 to 3 months, because by giving them that consistent traction, they are improving. So this was an indicator that this works. It was also a way to attract investment into a very difficult market by giving them an asset class that has goods that they can actually attach to, and a way in which if there is a failure in a transaction and we have to liquidate it, our investors, don't say, my experience investing in Africa, Cameroon specifically, was so bad I lost my money. So we have satisfied a 360-degree requirement to make a healthy business ecosystem. Customers who can access capital to do the right things with it so that the value chain is satisfied and continues to attract capital into the system with good repayability at the very end of it, and the transparency that comes from a digitized system or process.
Okay. I see that Ovamba is also involved in logistics of businesses. So I wonder, because I did see a tweet some time ago, I think it was Rebecca and Ongjong who shared it, but it was somewhere on the internet where they said a good will take about 10 days to leave China and arrive a port somewhere in Africa, but to leave one country to one part of, the port in Africa into a landlocked country, it could take 3 months. So
Yeah.
how do you bid those? Say, for example, if goods come to Douala Port and they need to go to Chad, how do you deal with the logistics of the bad roads and ensuring that they get there on time for them to be sold in order for new goods to come in without the money being wasted or that time wasted?
That's because we work very closely with the wholesale businesses who have those customers from those regions. So much of the time, by giving a consistent track record to the wholesalers, when their retail customers come from wherever they're coming from, they're coming to pick up goods based on the fact that the order they place is definitely going to be there and available for them. The reality of what sometimes happens is these guys come from Chad or wherever, and they go to see whether their usual supplier has goods, but unfortunately they've been failed for whatever business management or expertise has occurred. Ovamba does put in logistics in place by delivering goods to specific key warehouses in regions that are centralized for everybody to get to. You can consider this the Airbnb of warehousing. This is an idea that we're bringing into the arena of the bank partners who are not able to manage collateralized warehousing. This idea isn't new. You see this with coffee and cocoa, where the farmers of these commodities need to be able to store goods in a place that is certain, is bonded, is insured, and it gives the buyer the comfort of knowing that the goods that I asked for are exactly where they say they are. And it also goes back to your question about Sharia and why we became Islamic. When we realized that if we could buy the goods and have legal and physical ownership of those goods, then we know that we can be sure that there would not be a failure in the transaction. Somebody looked at this and said, this is Islamic finance. So Marvin and myself and the rest of our team studied, learned, became certified, and began to digitize and build these features into our entire technology stack and into our business processes. And it's been successful now for quite a number of years.
Oh, wow, that's pretty interesting. I have a question here from Baba Commissaire. I'll just be throwing the questions to you as we go along so that you can respond to them before we move on to a different topic. So it's from Baba Commissaire, who's asking, is Ovamba cloud-based or on-premises based?
It is a cloud-based solution. All of our apps are in the cloud. All of the finance processes and the data and the decisioning is all cloud-based. Our customers use apps, and our bank partners now, through a new product that is actually called Bank Partner, have this as a SaaS, which is a software as a solution technology option for them. The thing that is premises-based is all the physicality of storing and managing and distributing those goods.
Okay, thank you for that, Viola. So, because we live in a world now, which is, I don't know if after coronavirus would be as global, but I would still like to think that it's very much so global that when you're looking for technological solutions, it's important to have a local lens as opposed to a global lens, as opposed to a local one. As you can see in the case of,
The word for that, Pamela, is glocal.
Global, yes, of course, bringing local to the global stage. So that's why I'm going to ask you this next question about how Ovamba was able to, raise funding to start up. So you raised funding from UK-based GLI Finance, which is backed by BlackRock Global, AXA Investment Managers, and Barclays Wealth. So who else did you approach for funding, and how did you know that they're a good fit, or that what your company was selling, they would buy?
Well, this is the VC world that we're talking about. When we first started in 2013, we did a friend and family raise, and we did a pre-seed raise. And then GLI came in early, seeing the promise of what we were trying to do at the time, what we have since gone on and successfully executed, and the size of the market and its potential. So raising that capital on an equity basis and then moving on to raising significantly more than that from those institutional investors, including GLI, who wanted to be able to fund and invest in the transactions themselves, which is very different from the VC and the equity side of the investment activity that we were engaged in at the time. Now, at the beginning of your wonderful show, you said that I was one of 34 women who had ever raised more than $1 million. $1 million is not very much. But what is significant about that is how very divided the world is as it relates to what you need to know to become successful. I had absolutely no idea that that was a thing. I just knew that Marvin and I had to raise capital so we could get to Cameroon, start operations, and help to pay our staff and get this pilot underway. It wasn't until Catherine Finney did a report called the Diana Report, Digital Undivided. And actually, it was Rebecca Inonchong who said, "You've raised capital, why don't you answer these questions?" It is very scary when you become aware and you look back at what you didn't know you didn't know. I have no idea where we would be today if that awareness had been brought to mind that, oh my goodness, do you know how difficult it is for Black people, especially women, to raise their own money for their own tech company? It's not the same as going to your savings and crawling your way forward. It's because the investment world and the technology world does not have an accepted, no questions asked idea that Black women can be successful at innovating and running a tech firm, because everybody we see doesn't look like me. These are white guys in tight trousers and hoodies sitting in Silicon Valley being congratulated for failing and losing a lot of money, but the pressure on us is very different. So when we raised that money, it was with an emotional intent to be very, very responsible, which means that our growth projection was a little slower, but the potential was very high. As I sat down with those other women, some who had raised 7, 10 million and more, that's when I began to understand the sisterhood of that power investment arena, where there are so many great women who are building world-changing solutions and have learned how to talk the talk and walk the walk, and that language of leadership that says, we're here, we're not leaving, we need that money, we can produce yield, and you need to take a chance on us, because I was once quoted, until you hear the story of the idiot that said no to some great Black innovator, a woman in particular, we will continue to miss out on the stories of success that will provide inspiration to others who want to do better than us.
Exactly. So I'm not sure if maybe when you answer the questions, if you kind of mentioned, was this the first time you did something like this, you raised funds?
No, and this is what's scary. You mentioned that I had been with an investment company in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I was so unaware that I was raising capital in the quants that I was, because there were always older white men around me. So I felt like I was one of the team.
Yeah.
And I was so unaware of how much I had learned about back office management, compliance, investor management, and all of the aspects required to make an investment fund successful, until one day I got really cheesed off and just got up and I walked out. And I sat down and I took a very long, hard look at myself and realized, you can actually do this. But because I had not been traditionally educated the way most people are, I was still looking through the lens of, you need to be qualified in order to be justified to enter through this, into this hallowed ground. But I decided, look, when I was younger and I got into IBM and all those other companies, it wasn't because I was educated, it's because I could prove I could do it. Now I can do it for myself. And sometimes when the student is ready, the master will arrive. And it was around about that time that Marvin Cole came along as this incredibly gifted, smart, visionary strategist who said, Africa's going to be big. And I, the African in the diaspora, had the idea that no, it isn't, because this is all I know. But I had the intuition that I think he may be right. And that's when we were able to work together.
Wow, that's very interesting. Because sometimes when you hear all these stories, you're not very sure what happens in the background. One of the things that struck me about your experience was you've already been talking about data. So I was wondering if you had to make a detailed business plan, because I understand that most people, when you're raising money, you're going through seed round or all the different rounds, the people who are giving money to you, they want to see a sample product and not just a plan, given that ideas are dime a dozen, that they're inundated with on a daily. So if you had to show some business plan and you had to use data to quantify the possibility of your business, how do you get the data region like Cameroon or in Africa in general, which has limited data collection in this area?
We were a fintech company with no fin and no tech when we were raising capital, which is absolutely hilarious. It was just chutzpah, gut, and going on an instinct that this space here, that remittances, which outstrip investment in Africa, obviously has an opportunity for an investment thesis. And one of the first investors we went to is a guy by the name of Robert Sheehan, who has since gone on to be part of a successful IT firm that sold their business to Lockheed Martin. And he was one of the first people we spoke to. The business idea we had then has absolutely zero to do with what we have now. We had no data, we had information, and this is a pretty typical situation for Africa. There isn't a lot of data for what you want sometimes, but there's definitely information, and there's the ability to tell a story that has a cohesive narrative that somebody can say, this makes sense. And you obviously are the ones that seem to have the ability to do this. The management team looks sound. The business thesis is sound. You've shown that there are things that you don't know and don't understand. And we believe that you have the skill to pivot and know when to make a shift, because that's really all that you can do. Your business ideas are never going to make sense as when you first start out, because you haven't done it before. So your expectations are very much theoretic. You just have to go through the process. And that's where building relationships is important, because things are not going to be what you said they were going to be in the beginning. And so our business plan was very theoretical, and it's got nothing to do with what we do today.
Wow, that's really interesting to find out about all of that. So you're learning throughout all these processes, and you've already mentioned about your digital report and the things you found out that you weren't aware of. So this report that came out in 2015 listed you as one of the Black women. Obviously, they have raised 1 million, which in your opinion is not a lot, but for other people still trying to raise, just a little amount of money, that's enormous. You've already highlighted some of the hurdles that perhaps were greater than those that would have been encountered by, say, your white colleagues or perhaps a man. But did having a co-founder help more or less, if you think?
Absolutely. We all know now, unless you've been living under a rock, that a diversified management team has a much better chance of success than one that is just one individual, because you don't have the diversity of ideas and you don't have the viewpoints that you need that are different from yours. So Marvin obviously is a guy, and then there's me. And we're also age diverse. Marvin is 17 years younger than me. And then we brought on Prashant. Prashant is from India. He's a pure tech, robotics and coding genius. I am a relationships, very intuitive person who views things very differently from somebody like Marvin, who is traditionally educated with an MBA, knows finance, and is brilliant at strategy and at creating ideas that he thinks will work. I'm the one that holds the glue together of being able to say, human beings are not going to like this, or this is what the human being is experiencing. The thing about technology today is it's not impersonal, it's deeply personal, it's deeply humanistic. And I think that's what sets us apart. And as a management team, we look at the world from very diverse standpoints.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Viola. It's always good to have co-founders. I realized that someone was pointing out on Twitter today how most businesses that are successful, like Google, Facebook, they all have co-founders, and you never see them working by themselves. So I suppose when you're in a team, one head is better than two. Like two heads or more is better than one. Sorry. So in an interview that you wanted to How We Made It in Africa early last year, you were asked what you wish you knew about entrepreneurship before you got started, and your response was, I wish I had known that the best time to raise capital is right after you raise capital.
Yep.
I don't get it. What do you mean by
that? Even the Bible, I think, which I don't actually look in very often, says something about to he who has more will be given.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, when you've just raised money, it's easier to attract more money. If you don't have any money, people are afraid to give you money because you don't actually have the ability to show what you did with the money the last time. But it's always easier to go out and say, look, so-and-so has invested in us. This is what we have. Would you like to come along? Because then you can share the risk from an investment standpoint with the capital that you have in place. Because people say, well, if this so-and-so is going to take a risk on you, then I will as well. And then you have the ability to figure out who is subordinate to the debt? Who, if it fails, do you pay first? Investors are always looking to figure out, where am I in the pecking order if this goes wrong, or where am I in the pecking order if this goes right? So having more than one round with multiple layers in it is a much better way to do that. And I always advise people, the minute you raise capital, go out and raise some more. It's much easier to say no to something than to be begging for something.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now you have the money in hand after all the funding rounds that you've been through. You're ready to launch operations and you choose Cameroon. Why?
Believe it or not, Cameroon is one of the best petri dishes to experiment in. It's so difficult that if you get it right there, you'll probably get it right in other places. Cameroon also is Africa in miniature, not just because of all the lovely culture and the weather, but because it has 262 different tribes of individuals who exhibit particular behaviors that you may want to take into account if you're like us and you view cultural impact on repayability. It has Christian and Muslims. It has French and English law running concurrently. It's part of OHADA. And it's just a great place where if you get it wrong, you will know very, very quickly. And if you get it right, you'll also have this accelerated validation that your idea is working. On top of that, my parents are from there. And it was a place where I knew I had relationships. So off we went. And it has been one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And the only thing that saved me is just how ignorant I have often been about how difficult things are till you look back and you go, oh my word. So yes, Cameroon was the right place to start this. And based on that, it would make you think, well, if that's the case, why are we not having more sandboxing going on in Cameroon? And I think that's because great hubs and other incubators, especially in the Northwest and Southwest, have taken over that responsibility from any of the ministries that could have used this time, especially with COVID-19, to collaborate with private sector innovators to figure out what solutions are we going to curate for the next time we get slammed by a global crisis that hits Africa, especially when we didn't make it ourselves.
Indeed. I'll come back to the COVID-19 angle towards the end of the show, but for now, I need to carry on before I lose this. So you're in Cameroon. Let's look at the Cameroon regulatory environment as it relates to your industry, which is financial tech. So in terms of ease of doing business, how easy was it for you to set up shop in Cameroon?
Well, I'm sorry, can you repeat that question for me?
So in terms of setting up shop in Cameroon, how easy was it for you to do that? Looking at the regulatory environment.
Theoretically, it's not hard. It's a straightforward thing to do, but it can be difficult if you don't know what you're doing, or if you fall prey to individuals giving you advice that is not in keeping with what you're trying to do. Now, as an innovation company, the main challenge is that policy and regulation can't keep up with innovation. So if you're a company like Ovamba back in 2013, the government actually doesn't quite know what category you belong to. So sitting down and speaking to either notaires in the littoral province, you're trying to explain things and they're trying to put you into a box that fits their comfort of, well, this is what it belongs to, because they don't understand. But the idea that you come with a business plan, they want to see that, they want to know share capital. They need to know that you have a board that has approved that you open bank accounts, that you can open this company. Some of the stuff that you're asked to do is a little bit repetitive and redundant, but you go to a lawyer and get them to help you, or the government actually has something called guichet or unique, I think, or was it guichet? Yeah, guichet unique, where it's supposed to be 3-day process of getting your tax ID number, your company registered, and you're off to the races and you're ready to go, and your tax base and all of the information that they give you so that you can put it on display in the office and you can get started. For me, it was complicated because I didn't speak very much French at the time, but we were able to, after a few false starts and individuals that were not really trying to help us, but were truly just trying to feather their nest, let's be very honest about that, able to make our way and hire staff who cared enough, because they realized if you screw around with me, you're affecting yourself. So give me the right information. And we've been successful ever since then, but it was a little rocky at first.
Wow. Well, finally, it's glad to know that you were able to do that. And I would hope that that buffet is still open so that we can talk more about this, because I'm still seeing a lot of discussions on social media about how that's not working too well. But anyways, I'll carry on. So contractual obligations are another item that appears to be a bane for most businesses. So there is a huge trust issue, as contracts do not appear to be binding like one would observe in other parts of the world. So how do you get customers, clients to respect contracts without involving lawyers or resorting to taking them to court?
Disrupting the behavior of customers was one of the biggest challenges of building this company, to be perfectly honest. There seems to be an interesting cultural approach to certain types of individuals knowing full well that they owe money on a contract, but they'd rather take that money and pay a police officer to completely mess you around. It took us a while to understand that that's the case, which is why we changed our business model to one that looked as if you are putting all of the mitigation up front and taking care of that before proceeding. Also, using AI became really valuable for us because we began to see behaviors, patternistic characteristics, and ways in which to red flag things before it became a problem. It also told us who was best to work with. But the contractual side of business in Cameroon is subject to a massive overhaul. I'm going to bring this back again to COVID-19. You would like to believe that the transparency of a contract can be respected if there are PDFs and electronic signatures in place. We have yet to reach that stage. Individuals get away with it because lawyers can sometimes be easy to persuade. You might have a lawyer and only find out that he's actually a lawyer to the person that you are in litigation with. This can happen. It's even been said that there are some judges that will switch their opinion and join allegiance with the person that you are in litigation with, depending on just how much quote unquote motivation is on the table. I think it's important to say these things out loud and not pretend it doesn't happen, because if you don't do this, it continues. And the next generation of businesses, innovators, and tech aspirants coming behind us will not have been able to take advantage of these learnings. But contractual respect in Cameroon is at an all-time low, and that's one of the reasons why Cameroon does sit in a sad place as it relates to corruption. Exactly. People are raised to think that they're doing the smart, wise thing if they can get away with it because it's applauded in the culture, especially right now. If you know full well that at the very top of the chain, the social contract between leadership and everyday people is being decimated with the loss of lives, then how on earth are you expecting people will respect that a repayment on a contract is going to happen? It's very difficult.
Oh my days. I mean, this is something to be worked on if ease of doing business is supposed to be improved, because these are some of the important things I guess that investors look at before they come into a country and throw in money. Exactly, because it's like, how easy can I get my money out? You know, like the exit strategy is very important for investors.
It can be done if you understand how these things are structured. One of the things that Rebecca Enonchon pointed out to us at the very beginning of this was that there is a bilateral agreement that you can read and understand the tax treaties and the relationships and how taxes are put together in Cameroon. And that tax code is huge, but you need to be able to understand it to realize that things are possible. And you have to make sure that you speak to individuals in the government. Whether you want to be friends with them or not is a totally different matter, but understanding what they're saying and being able to go back and get advice, which you also need to be careful about. So you should be willing to experiment your way through understanding how do these things actually really apply in the real world. Now, going back to that, one of the things I've pointed out to investors is we've done all of the hard work up front of literally failing our way through the contractual process to where we are today with contracts that work and work with the customers that also respect it. You cannot be foolish and just do business with everybody and anybody. Some customers are horrific. You shouldn't touch them with a barge pole. And that's the truth. You don't want to do business with them. And after a while, you can smell them coming. Stay away from them.
Yeah, you did highlight that you kind of had a system that you could look through and be able to, gauge the red flags of such customers not to work with. What are some of these things that came out to you?
Well, at the risk of giving away what our risk models are really about, because that's our secret sauce and that's
Okay.
our loan. But you take a look at individuals who, let's say, have started numerous businesses because they failed or they haven't paid taxes. That information is accessible. You can get that. Or you can take a look at individuals whose businesses constantly have the different names of owners. That's also a sign. The banks have access to lists because they're in the banking sector that can give them information about depositors or other companies, but there's nothing that you can go to that is maybe a credit bureau report to get a comprehensive list of other individuals. You can also take a look at the relationships that people have to see what kind of business are they involved in and what is their standing in the society. Now, when we first started Ovamba, we were very keen to find a way to create a digital network of all of the Njangis because they rely on the social contract of somebody being referenceable and having shown that they've got good repayability. But that was very, very difficult to do. I don't doubt that someday somebody will be able to do that and it's a great business model. But when we tried it, the timing was wrong. But we are looking at funding people who are in business and we're taking risk on their business activity and everything else. It gives us a lot more to adapt the risk to their particular behaviors. And we've been able to do that quite successfully.
Okay. So how do you find these businesses? Do they come to you or do you go to them?
When we first started, we made the ridiculous mistake of setting up a telemarketing team. So I want you and your viewers to imagine 2013, not as much technology as we have now. I think we were still on 2G back then. And you got a group of individuals saying, hello, this is so-and-so from a new company called Ovamba. We'd like to give you some money. And everybody would just hang up the phone. It just looks and sounds like a 419. So that was our first misstep, which is very typical when you come into a new environment and you just don't know what you're doing. Since then, we did have a sales team. The sales team was successful. And then the apps and the technology took over. And there were opportunities of working with people like Adeline's Today, who put us in magazines. We went on TV. And we did everything for people to see who we were. We didn't want people to come to our office, but we realized, culturally speaking, that's never going to work. People want to come to who they actually are. Cameron wasn't ready for digital prime time where everything is hands-free and you never see anybody. So we had to build relationships, become known, spend time speaking with the microfinance institutions and all the rest of them. And then we started to see a take-up of repeat customers coming with their other customers for funding, and word of mouth got out. I think now we can safely say a lot of people in Cameroon know who we are.
Wow, that's interesting. And referral in most African settings by word of mouth is the strongest, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. You've highlighted a bit about the taxation framework, which I was going to come round to, and we have identified that this is quite a huge issue, a convoluted process. So your experience of this was simply reading through that massive book, understanding all the tax codes, and once you have that, you're fine. You won't have any more complications.
No, that's not the case. And in fact, there will continue to be complications because with every change of the personnel in these departments, the interpretation shifts ever so slightly. So you start to see this. And also in my, I remember mentioning that I was not trained in finance, but I do understand it from a very specific standpoint. It would appear to me that Cameroon's tax code is intricately intertwined with their desire to prevent money laundering and fraud. And frankly, they should be separated and managed by digital processes. So when you have the Cameroon code saying that you must declare money that's coming in and going out, that's to do with foreign exchange limitations and the challenges that the country is having at the moment with liquidity management. But that means that they should not be having so many layers of taxation that if you were to try to adapt everything that they've said, you would end up charging investors somewhere in excess of 48%, which would be a haircut of the profits that they would get from a good and smart investment. So you have to be able to understand, how do you set up the structures with the Ministry of Finance, and where are the breaks that you're supposed to be able to qualify, or how to structure in a way that you can mitigate some of that. Cameroon doesn't have tax treaties with many countries. As far as I can tell from that documentation, it's only Canada and France. And when it comes to fraud, all of this excessive taxation, in my opinion, is to keep up with the wonderful gouging that they've been able to maintain over the last goodness knows how many centuries as we continue to deposit our currencies into their little bank accounts. So once that's gone, which maybe not in my lifetime, but hopefully one day, then I would expect that there will be an adjustment to the tax code, which does nothing for generating wealth or for helping people to want to pay taxes because they see that it's beneficial for the ecosystem and the environment. And I'll stop there because I don't like politics.
Okay, that's all very fair. But I was just curious, and our audience would be too, as in interacting with other businesses and with all these taxation officers, can't they clearly see that this is problematic?
Well, there's what you see and understand as problematic, and then there's the reality of the ecosystem that continues to reward the incorrect assessment of these taxes. Now, if they stopped writing in bits of paper and had a centralized database or some sort of blockchain or even just a good spreadsheet, we would not have these issues. But because there is a constant leakage of information so that there is no continuity, we're constantly having to redress these issues as companies, going back to make sure that taxes are correct. And then there's the punitive level at which penalties are assessed if you miss a day or don't understand how things work. And then the final rung of that horrific ladder is if you're given the wrong advice about your tax classification from organizations that should know better, or in fact, they just don't know either. So it's difficult when there isn't enough transparency of information that is delivered in a way because they want the company or the startup to succeed. Because we have unfortunately gone through French colonization, incumbents will always be favored and protected from the disruption of newcomers. So they keep and maintain a gatepost and a gateway that is preventative to newcomers coming in and succeeding. These systems are not created for you to succeed. They're created to prevent the incumbents from being toppled off their seats.
Wow. So there's actually been a liberalization of market without actual democratization of that market. Oh, wow. Well, this is interesting because now that you mentioned this, when I had Michelle Docky on here, Michelle is a lawyer, and she herself also admitted that even as a lawyer, it took her more than a year to figure out what to do in order to set her business up. So the struggle is really real. Well, I'll carry on so that we can move away from politics and all of that. So you talked about the people that you work with, and looking at hiring people, it's evident that there's a huge skills deficit in Cameroon and Africa in general as a result of the disconnect between what is taught in school and what businesses really need. So I am interested in how Ovamba hired the current staff, propelling it to such a great height. What did you look for in candidates and why?
When we first started, we were looking for individuals who had a banking background until we understood that the banking background is actually a hindrance to being innovative and creative. The banking mindset and the banking skill set in Cameroon is geared towards following instructions and checking it off. It's not geared towards using your intuition to do something better and then sharing that knowledge with everybody so that you can do a better job as the relationship managers or as the credit manager. Everybody conspires to comply. And anything outside of is just not handled. And that's why we have long delays and bottlenecks in the financial systems. We hired individuals from there. And as our business evolved and as we pivoted, we changed that. In fact, we began to see a pattern in Ovamba. Individuals who had not been through particular types of formal education, but understood trading and informal business and understood relationships were much, much better. Some of my favorite hirings in Ovamba were individuals who used to be drivers, who just understood business, but just needed a chance. Many individuals in Cameroon, even those young boys who have degrees and are riding Okadas, all they need is the democracy of opportunity. They need an opportunity. Ovamba sits itself knowing full well that we can change the environment by giving smart, intelligent, gifted people a chance to prove themselves. Whenever we interview people and I ask them the question, what do you think will be the most important thing that you can bring to the table? Many mistakenly say my education. Well, your education whether it's a degree or an MBA, is not stamped on your forehead, neither is your education going to be a guarantee that you will look at the world from such a different angle from us that you can be a helpful and creative addition to the team. And so some people don't survive very well in Ovamba because they're looking for a scenario where they're told what to do and they are not responsible if it goes wrong because they can say, so-and-so told me to do this. No, we want individuals that can come and tell management the right way and the best way to do this. After all, we're from outside. We've got brilliant ideas, but we need the team and the power of teamwork. So our hiring is very much based on inclination, attitude, personality, and creative intelligence.
Mm-hmm. So you've talked about, you've highlighted a little bit about people management in a new culture. So you've moved from an environment which operates with a completely different work ethic. Then there is the issue of staff adhering to the design company work culture in order for your business to function properly. So what did you have to do to get your staff to respect your expected work culture at Ovamba? Like you highlighted, you want them to bring solutions. So how do you get them to understand that without saying so-and-so told me to do this, and therefore if it goes pear-shaped, it's not my fault?
It's the training. Training actually starts at the interview level when we ask people questions about when did you first break the rules? When did you last break the rules? Tell us something dishonest that you did that you benefited and you succeeded. Would you do it again? What would so-and-so say about you? If you were to meet a version of yourself from the caveman eras, what would that person be like? So by getting people to think on the other side of their brain, you start to see a different side of their personalities, because the truth of the matter is the Cameron education system really murders creativity in children as young as 8 years old, because you are not asked to create anything, you're asked to repeat things. You're asked to study so you can pass a test, but you actually don't have any ideas of your own. So if you sit down in an interview with somebody and you say to them, what did you want to be when you were a kid? Oh, I always wanted to be a banker. My usual answer is, you're such a damn liar. No 5-year-old says I want to be in banking. They want to go to the moon and they want to do something brilliant for humanity. But the truth of the matter is that young child is still inside of you. What you now have to do to become a fully realized adult, especially within the African continuum, is take that young child and have their best possible personality traits become a good member of a business team in some way. So we train people on how to argue with management so that you don't feel like you're going to lose your job. We train people in logic trees. We train people with learning how to experiment with a lean fashion. We use lean startup principles and things that you're probably not going to learn in university in Cameroon. In fact, we had an intern who said, can I just stay? I don't want to go back to university. And I said, why? He said, I've learned more here in 3 months than I've learned in the last 2 years. Well, I explained to him, you started the journey, you got to end it. And we hire individuals who show a particular type of personality. These are the ones that succeed the most.
Wow. So that's interesting. So lessons for everyone out there looking for solutions. So there is a lot of discussion right now on the innovation revolution that is ongoing on the continent, which has given rise to some Africans providing solutions to African problems. Mobile telephones have had a great impact on the economies of most countries on the continent. So Viola, in your opinion, can Africa realize the dream of a cashless and digital society given the explosion in mobile phone use?
Not today, not next week, not next month, and probably not even next year. But we do have the perfect alignment of stars for that to happen in an accelerated fashion. Money is going to become dangerous to touch with COVID-19, and you think about the spread of contagion. The people who have mobile phones, all of them are using it for exchanging credit in some way. So the opportunity is there. What we have a challenge with is the technology innovation and the legal frameworks that the banks need in order to connect to these mobile wallets and to these different remittances platforms. They are not quite there yet. Maybe East Africa is a little ahead, but those of us in the middle and over to the west, not. The love of paper and the fear of anything that doesn't have cachet on it prevents the mindset of most bankers of going beyond their current realities, and that needs to be disrupted as quickly as possible. Which is why companies like Ovamba have begun to put themselves into relationships with central banks to help guide them through this, because with digital capital and with TradeTech, you now have a better way of tracing the movement of capital through goods and services. And that will give you the visibility into the far reaches of the last milers who you need to bring into financial integration in order to have a sound and decent economy that can weather these kinds of knocks.
Mhm. So in terms of skills development, creativity, career orientation, and education, which you've sort of highlighted the experience of the intern you had. So in your opinion, Viola, how can Africa and its entrepreneurs ensure progress is inclusive, innovation helps entire segments of the population still struggling to fulfill basic needs?
I think two things have to happen at the same time. One is the digitization of services and banking. Everything from education to healthcare is up for improvement and disruption, and to change the educational system. We can't have everybody thinking they're going to be doctors, lawyers, and engineers. But we do have individuals who can go to vocational schools and learn the digital process for all the secondary industries that are going to come out from where we're headed as a continent, especially in light of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, where we're going to start to see cross-border trade and the movement of products, services, and solutions. We need to give people the ability to monetize their talent by teaching entrepreneurship in school, teaching coding, teaching the innovative mental process in the same way that we taught the scientific approach to understanding how to fix problems or analyze something. We also need to bring manufacturing to our continent. We need to teach logistics and shipping and not just have one French company be in charge of the whole thing. We need to give individuals the opportunity to bid on contracts to provide products and services and solutions instead of it always going out. After all, most of us are outside. We can do just as well as a German or a French or a Chinese company. So governments need to change the way in which they tender. Schools need to be adjusted to provide for the learnings that we need for the new industries that are coming. And we need to have digital banking and currency.
Wow, that's interesting. And I'm loving what I'm hearing. So, you know, so thank you for your patience thus far, Viola. We're kind of drawing towards the end of the program. You already highlighted some of your thinking throughout on what you think should change as a result of coronavirus in terms of how it might affect, holding cash and perhaps how businesses operate. But are there any other areas that you think will change in the fintech sector in terms of what it offers around the world as a result of this coronavirus pandemic?
I think we'll see a lot more cross-global collaboration of sharing open source ideas, open source technology, because we're now in a race for time. I think that there will be many companies that will not view this as, I want to capture market share so that I can be profitable. It will be, I want to capture market share so that I can democratically spread opportunity and wealth in a way that is sustainable. After all, people are dying. The human capital is disappearing in coffins. This is really scary. We need to be able to work together to fix these problems, and we need to make sure that we are ready for a post-COVID lifestyle. So post-collaborative, post-COVID-19 collaboration, cross-global collaboration. And I think that there will be a renewed interest in investing in the space because much of the world is going through so much difficulty, and with the broken supply chains, there will be the requirement to build local manufacturing on the continent. That's an investment opportunity.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting to hear. Now, you've mentioned, because you at the start of the show, you mentioned about sustaining generational wealth, and you've also just highlighted that now. Because in Africa, it's been a very difficult thing to establish generational wealth. Once let's say if it's a liquid Dangote, if he dies, then the children can't keep up with it. So what is it that we can do to ensure that this happens? Is it about making sure that the legal structure is firm and the law firms are transparent and honest in order to ensure that the codicils or in the wills are respected? What is it? What keeps the business going for generations that we're not doing?
I want to talk about this from a civil and human standpoint. The way we celebrate wealth and success does not respect the process by which a person got to that stage. So we don't share those learnings. An individual may be the most successful in their family. They don't respect partnerships. There's no sense of trust. Things are rumor driven. There's a lot of consumption in their lifestyle and in their lifetime, because most people don't actually understand how to generate and sustain and protect wealth. They're not using insurance products to make sure that if there's errors or omissions, or if somebody dies, there's money to bury them. Instead, they're going to go out and throw all of that money into a funeral when they wouldn't even give that person that money for investment. So what we have here is cultural behavior. Once that shifts and change, then we will have generational wealth. Once banks want to keep a customer and will do anything to service them, then we will see this situation changing. When we see women being allowed into the workforce and into the business sector as fully realized human beings, not in situations, for example, you may have heard about a young Cameroonian writer who wanted to write a book so that she could make money, and she couldn't get the contract signed with the publisher because the publisher said, no, only men can sign these contracts. This happened in the last 4 years. Once these things stop being an issue, then we're going to see generational wealth being transferred in its full entirety so that the next generation who has brilliant ideas can make more success out of it. But right now, we're falling behind in this area.
Oh, wow. So, Viola, before you leave, I have one question here from our audience. I don't know if other people have more questions, but it's still from Baba Commissaire, who is asking what does it take to invest in Ovamba? So, are the investment opportunities still open? So, how can he invest if he wanted to?
Most definitely are. Ovamba has a very rigorous AML and KYC process, which stands for anti-money laundering and know your customer. This is a requirement throughout the entire world. So once we assess whether or not you are an accredited investor, the question is, are you looking to invest in equity, which is ownership in the company, or are you trying to invest in the transactions? If that is the case, what needs to happen is there is a phone call and an email exchange with us for us to ensure that you understand what is involved here. And then we can take a look at which of the risk classes you're involved in. But don't forget, right now, Ovamba is partnering with banks. So there is a great pipeline of transactions that can be invested in, but we like to do some very rigorous due diligence. So anybody who wants to know more should get in touch with me after the show.
Thank you for that. So another question is, how do you intend to break the Cameroon market when so many people shy away from technology, and looking also at instability of power?
I don't know if that question still applies. We broke the Cameroon market quite a few years ago. We've had more than 1,000 transactions across our platforms. We've funded more than 350 something customers with a 32% repeat rate of coming back for more business. Some customers are on their 8th transaction with us. And we've now opened this up to banks to be able to do, and banks have thousands and thousands and thousands of customers, and they now are in an urgent state to digitize and create new ways of onboarding customers and new ways of measuring risk, especially in light of the need to keep some sort of distance. So we've already broken the Central African region and West Africa, and this now is the time why we are actually speaking to people about expanding and partnering with more banks.
Thank you for that, Viola. And we have a very positive comment here for Fru Vitalis Chi, who's saying your leadership skills are amazing. I really wish you can organize workshops to empower Cameroonian youth.
It's funny you should say that. I was on a call yesterday with a Cameroonian guy by the name of Max Ateba, who he and his Benin and Guinean partners have a series called AAN, and it's all about empowering African youth, especially those in the diaspora. And I think that we should do one that is particularly for Cameroonians, because the Cameroon issues are slightly different. Africa is not one amorphous group, but Cameroonian youth have specific challenges that are unique to them. And it would be helpful to work with them. Who's this? For
Hanson Kanji.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I would do anything to help the youth. They are our future. They're the signposts of our history, as I say. Anybody who thinks they're building a business so that they can chop now is missing out on what it means to live forever as a piece of legacy in the minds of the young. We need to create a future for them that they can step into and be functional. You can't take this with you. You should be looking to become a footnote in the history of the successes of other people. I don't want to live in a world where it's just me one at the top of a mountain. That's lonely and stupid. The whole concept of winning is not about I win, you lose. It's about the circular engagement and how you distribute power and enablement for other people to realize their dreams as well.
Wow, those are very strong words to leave this show away with. But I would just want to ask, just in case you had any extra nuggets to say before we go.
To women, be comfortable with changing your mind and saying no. You are just as well equipped as anybody else. And to men in business in Cameroon, partner with women, seek ways to be of service to everybody else, especially in this era that we're living in. And to parents, raise your kids with an entrepreneurial mindset and ensure that you can augment their education with extending their childhood, because when you do that, you bring out creativity. I want everybody to understand that we can make Cameroon a better place, because the civil engagement between two people is something that governments cannot interrupt. You can choose to honor a contract and to behave honorably in business with people. And you can choose to give other people an opportunity so that there is more for everyone. Once it's like that, we will get better. The power is in our hands to do so. And I think my final word is to thank you, Pamela, for making this platform available to so many people. If it wasn't for people like you, things would be worse. So I am grateful to you.
Well, Viola Llewellyn, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. So thank you for joining us despite your busy schedule. We're so happy you could make the time to share your experiences with us in the financial tech space in Cameroon and in Africa in general. So thank you.
This ain't your grandma's Africa, people.
So to our gracious audience, thank you for participating. Stay tuned for future episodes of Facing the Facts. Have a good afternoon or evening, depending on your time zone. And from the team here at Delhi TV, stay safe and goodbye. Thank you, Viola. Goodbye, everyone.